So, death, judgment, heaven and hell. So there are only four last things that matter.
Later.
So are you translating or?
Later.
No translation.
今訳した言い方分からへん。
OK。今日は刺繍についてを勉強します。
And the whole goal of the game, everything that we do here, is to enable the souls to die in a state of grace. If you only have one business, it is to die in a state of grace. All the other businesses are insignificant.
私たちの生きる目的は一つです。天使の成長の状態に入ること。そしてその状態で死ぬことです。
And then the number two is to die a bad death in a state of sin is the worst thing that can happen to us. Nothing worse can happen to us than to die in a state of sin.
そして最悪のことは罪の状態で死ぬことです。これ以上最悪なことはありません。
So, if you die in a state of, if you got everything, but you die in a state of sin, you are in a worse predicament. And that's what our Lord said, what profits man to win everything, but to lose his soul.
罪の状態で死ぬことを全て失うことだと主はおっしゃいました。
And the opposite is true. All the bad things can happen in your life, and it doesn't matter as long as you die in a state of grace.
そして逆のこともおっしゃいました。一生の間で罪の状態で生きていたとしても、最後に成長の状態で死に至った場合、
どんだけ悪いことがあったとしても、
どれだけ悪いことがあったとしても、最後に
罪がない状態で死にいたら、それでよかった
ということです。
And the psalm says the death of the wicked is very evil. That is, nothing is more evil than the way they die, because it summarizes their life.
そして罪の状態で死ぬということはとても悪いことです。
And it's a terrible moment for them, because the veil is going to be lifted, and they are going to see that they have chosen for themselves permanent death, eternal death, and there is no terror, there is no fright that compares to their panic, their terror, their horror when they realize what they have done to themselves, that it is themselves who have inflicted this evil upon themselves.
そして罪人にとって死の時というのは非常に恐ろしいことです。ホラーです。恐怖のどん底です。彼らは自分で選びました。そして目の前に彼らが行くところがあります。それは永遠の死です。そして彼らはパニックになることもなります。
And there are famous deaths in Scripture to evidence the death of the sinner. There's the death of Herod. Herod was eaten by the worms in his belly. His belly started to rot, and he shed his entrails. Just like Judas, when Judas hanged, his belly opened and his entrails were shed.
悪人の最後というのは、例えばヒロデ王の最後がよく知られています。ヒロデ王のお腹は生きながらにして腐ってしまいました。それから、ユダ、キリストを裏切ったユダの死も有名です。彼の内臓が流れ出てしまいました。
The other famous one in the same type is King Antiochus. King Antiochus had persecuted the Hebrews at the time of the Maccabees, and he wanted to exact revenge, massacre the Jews, and on the way he had to stop because he had a terrible pain in his belly, and then his belly opened, and then his bowels were shed, but also he stung so bad that people would not draw near him. For the army preferred to go into the battle than to be with him, because it was such a torment just to smell him.
そして、
Antiochus Epiphanes.
アンティオキス・エピファニスという人の罪人、王様の罪人で、マカベの時代の王様で、彼の死もひどいものでした。旧約の時代です。で、彼の死の時、やっぱりお腹が腐ってしまって、とても強い匂いを発して、誰も彼を埋めるために近寄ることができなかった。
だから近くにいるのが
近くに入れない状態でした。お腹が
どれぐらい入れなかったかって言ったら、戦いに行く方が近くに行くより
近くマシ。
And you have the famous death of Henry VIII, the death of Luther. Luther hanged himself by his bed. Elizabeth I of England, she ate her fingers. So you have those historical deaths in history are very amazing. And because these people were committing evil, and so their death is a teaching for us. Henry VIII. I think he hanged himself like Luther, but I'm not quite sure, but he had a horrible death here. And Luther hanged himself. And Elizabeth the First ate her fingers.
キリスト教のカトリックを離れてイギリス国教会アングリカンを作ったヘンリー8世という王様、イギリスの王様は首をくくったという話です。それからその、死ぬ時にその孫のエリザベス1世は長い間女王の座にありましたが、死ぬ時自分の指を食べたということです。それから、もう一人誰だったっけ、ルターも
Luther hanged himself by his bed.
ベッドで首をくくったという。ルターという宗教改革でプロテスタントを作った人は、ベッドで自分の首をくくったということです。悪人の最後は3?
Yeah, and what's interesting now also today is the death of the rock stars. Very interesting.
そしてとても興味深いのはロックスターの死です。
Elvis Presley falls into such a depression that he uses drugs and he dies of drug overdoses.
エルビス・プレスリーはアメリカの有名なロックシンガーですが、うつ病になって、薬を飲みすぎて死にました。
Jim Morrison, the head of the Doors, dies in his bath tube, vomiting blood because as an effect of heroin.
Jim
Morrison.
ジェーム・モリソンという方、
is a rock star.
ロックスターですが、
So he died in his bath,
彼はお風
vomiting blood.
呂の中で血を吐いて死にました。なぜかというとヘロインの取りすぎでした。
And they called him the Serpent King because he was very devilish.
Serpent King?
Yeah, Serpent King.
Serpent King. Who is Serpent King?
Jim Morrison.
ジム・モリソンはサーパント・キング。
His fans called him the Serpent King.
サーパン
Because the devil is a snake. And so on the stage it was like a snake.
彼のステージは蛇に満ちた。彼はステージに
And so he
自分のことを蛇の王だと言っていました。
he became a drunkard, depressed, a drunkard, and his girlfriend came to Paris, and she gave him lots of heroin to sniff, and he became completely mad, completely sick, and he went to take a bath, and then his lung gave up, and he started to vomit blood in his bath. And so the water of his bath became red, and then he dies in his bath.
彼はお風呂、彼は蛇の王としてよくステージで活躍していたのですが、彼はうつ病に陥りました。そして彼のガールフレンドがその彼を慰めるために大量のコカイン、ヘロインを持ってきて、それを吸引しました。吸引したところお風呂の中で血を吐いて倒れて死にました。お風呂は真っ赤に血で染まりました。
And John Lennon, the head of the Beatles, in his songs he preached communism and rebellion against God. And then he was shot dead by a communist who thought that he was a hypocrite. And so John Lennon dies because of the sins of his life.
ジョン・レノンは ビートルズの一員でとても有名な方ですが、彼は共産主義とコミュニズム and
revolt against God.
神への反逆を大きく訴えた人でした。そして彼は彼の信奉者によって偽善者だと言って殺されてしまいました。
But because he was living a bourgeois lifestyle, you know, a high-end, very rich lifestyle, a communist killed him because he says you are a hypocrite.
で彼はコミュニストの思想を持ちながらとてもブルジョワ的な、上流社会な暮らしをしたために、共産主義者に嫌われて偽善者だと言われて殺されてしまいました。
And recently there was the death of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson fell into the hands of his enemies. He became completely nuts, completely crazy, depressed, and especially he lost the ability to sleep. He couldn't sleep anymore.
最近で有名なのはマイケル・ジャクソンです。マイケル・ジャクソンは、敵も多くいたようですが、そのためにうつ病に陥り、そして眠ることができなくなってしまいました。
So he had to put a mask to breathe oxygen, and he had to take heavy chemical treatment that would work less and less because he was sleeping only 1 hour a day. And he became a zombie. He became only skin and bones. And then his doctor got the wrong doses one day, and then he dies.
そして彼はついに1日に1時間しか眠れなくなりました。そのために彼はたくさんの薬を取って、そして顔にマスクをかけてその中に酸素吸入をして、それでなんとか健康を取り戻そうとしていましたが、だんだんゾンビのようになって骨と皮ばかりに痩せてしまって、ついには死んでしまいました。
But what is frightening in the death of Michael Jackson is that he was in a vicious circle. He was in a vicious circle. He had fallen into the hands of his enemies, and they wanted him to make money, but he was a wreck. And so the more he was a wreck, the more he was entering into debt, the more he had to make money, and the more he was a wreck. So he realized that he was caught. He realized that he was finished. Because he's done also a lot of evil, especially with the surrogate mothers and all kinds of manipulations and so forth.
彼は善徳に包まれて暮らしてはいませんでした。彼はどちらかというと悪徳にまみれて生活していました。確かに、たくさんの手引きに囲まれお金を儲けはしましたが、善徳
悪魔はお金をいっぱい作ってよかったけども残骸になってしまって何もできない。
And the death of the just is the opposite. That is, it's very peaceful, it's very happy. The just are happy to die. They are going home.
そして善人の最後というのはこの全く逆です。平和的で家に帰るのだという感覚です。
And they live usually, the saints very often leave a saint after they die. And then they die with a smile on their face, and there is a beauty on their face. Recently in the Philippines, I blessed a lady who had died, and she looked like a princess. She looked like very peaceful. It's very encouraging to see a face at the moment of death. It really confirms that we die the way we live.
最近私はフィリピンで女性を見とりました。彼女は顔に微笑みすら浮かべてまるでプリンセスのようで安らかに息を引き取りました。善人の最後というのは時には聖人の列に加えられることもありとても平和的なものです。
So of course God has pity on sinners, but for the most part, if you want to know the way you're going to die, you just look at the way you are living. For the most part, in most cases, the way you die, if you want to know the way you're going to die, just look at the way you are living, and then you know what's going to happen at your death.
ほとんどの場合、死の時というのはあなたの生きてた生き方そのままになります。
If you've been good, your death will be very peaceful.
あなたが善良な生活をしていたら、死の時は至って平和的なものです。
And you won't be afraid.
恐れる必要はありません。
You will want to go.
そこに行けます。行きたいところに行けます。
Whereas if you committed sins or you deny the faith, either you will die without knowing you die, or you will die in horrible circumstances.
罪の状態にだった時、その最後というのは死ぬか死ぬかなんかわからない状態にありますから、とても恐ろしいものです。
And you pray for your Japanese people, because most of the Japanese, when they die, they don't know what's happening. Nobody has told them.
ですから日本の人のために祈ってください。ほとんどの日本人は死ぬ時にどういうことが起きるのか分かっていません。
And Buddhism says after death, you disappear, or your soul becomes travels and becomes a deer in a Nara park or whatever.
仏教徒は死の時に全て終わると言いますが違います。
So people don't know what death is, and they don't know how to get ready.
人々は死のために用意をしないといけません。
But Scripture says, meditate on death, and you will not sin.
聖書に書かれてあります。死ぬことを常に意識しておれば、あなたたちは罪を犯しません。
And so it's a good thing to be at the side of people when they die, because it's a good meditation. It's the best.
死のことについて黙想することはとても良いことです。
And because then we see that sin is very serious, because there would be no death if there was no sin. So death enables us to see the gravity of sin.
死のことについて考えることはとても真面目なことです。
And also death enables us to see that we are nothing.
死の時に、イボ
We see that we are nothing.
あ
We are zero.
あ、イボ
No, we are nothing. We are not anything. We are before God. We are nothing.
神様の御前においては、天使様の御前においては私たちは無に等しいものです。
Alright. That's it.
以上です。
Shall we say graces?